My name is Scott Dysart. I'm a part of the Linguistic Institute in Thailand, in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and today we're going to introduce Saymore. The original purpose for Saymore was we're realizing that there are a lot of people who are speaking languages and they're dying out. There are not very many speakers of a certain language. So how do you document that language quickly? So the idea here is you can have a person come into a language community with a recorder, record the person talking any kind of setting quickly and take notes in a notebook, and then use Saymore to transcribe it, to gather the information about the project. And then sometime later, if you can find someone else who can speak the language, you can have it translated or you can have it transcribed. The main thrust or purpose is to record the language quickly, record stories, anything about the culture, because the language will be the repository for anything culture related. So that's the primary purpose behind Saymore. Saymore can be found at sil.org. So it's sil.org products and then Saymore. SIL also has a community site where you can go to ask questions about Saymore and get answers. The developers are fairly active on it, so they can, if you have questions about the product, the users can, as a user-led community, can come and provide answers for it. So that's where we can go get Saymore and we can install it. This is Saymore itself. Saymore is built around the idea of a project. So we're going to look at the project, sessions or the recordings themselves, and then the people who are involved in the project or in the session, the people who are recording or doing transcribing. But we're going to look at it in terms of project, then people, then session. So kind of go back and forth. So starting with project, I have an example project. You can see it's titled example project because I'm very original. So when you start out with a project, you want to document as much information as you can. Where is this project taking place? What are you doing? Who are you recording? What's the purpose? Are there funders for it? What information about that? The location of the project? Anything that you can contain right away about the project can go in here. And then we also have, we're going to skip access control for a minute and go down to description documents. Let's say you are working with a university for a research proposal and you've written up a proposal. You want to contain that in Saymore because Saymore also provides the ability to do the documentation of all the information about it. It all puts it in one place because a lot of us have trouble with file management. So Saymore can help with file management things. So you can put MOUs and anything that can go in here. And then Saymore has provided this thing called other document because we always have things that just don't fit, but we want to keep track of. So you can throw it here and you just click on add file and you can put anything in here. It doesn't matter what it is. You can add it to Saymore. And then you can open it up. It knows it's a Word doc. So if I were to click on this, it would open up this document in Word. And then Saymore also has a way of showing progress. This would show you how you're going at transcribing or working through all of the sessions in this project. A project can be one session. Like I say, you went to like a cultural event. The project could be getting the cultural event, and so that's one big session. Or the project could be documenting a language of which this cultural event is one thing, a wedding is one thing, a gathering food is one thing, listening to the grandmothers tell stories on rainy days, origin stories, any of those things can be a session. So the progress just kind of tells you how you're coming at working through all these sessions. And I only have one session in here, so it's not particularly interesting. So that's here. And then we're going to work through people. So people are anyone involved in the session, the people that you're recording. So if in a scenario where we have two old ladies just talking about stories from the past, both old ladies, if they're bantering back and forth, would be individual people in this thing. So you want to catch as much information about the person as you know. So I've got John Doe and Jane Doe here. I go to John Doe and put some information in here. John's primary language is English. It was spoken by his mother and father. Where did he learn the language? He learned it at home and at school. What other languages does John speak? He speaks French and Thai. If I were to say that his father actually spoke Thai primarily, I would click the face here, and then you can see it shifts from English down to Thai as far as indicating the father's primary language. But I'll put it back to English here. You can also list what the education, what's the person's primary occupation, what are their roles, because their experiences relate how they use the language, and you're wanting to document that. So this is a minority language that's dying out. So you're trying to capture as much information about the language as you possibly can, and that involves the speakers. So then, when were they born? Sometimes different people, different ages use different languages differently. We understand that. And then contact information. You can also add pictures if you wanted to. So I did the same for Jane Doe. I only have 2 people in my sessions, and you'll note that there's this thing for consent. We've come to realize that it's not enough just to get the recording. We have to get permission from the people to use their voice in particular for various products down the line. So what consent or permission do we have to do with their language? So let's say we recorded their language and we're using it for transcription and we're just going to get words. That's one thing. But if we want to record their language, have their audio, and then use their audio on a website, like a webinary where we've got their voice, their sound, what their voice sounds like on the website, we need to have permission for that. And we want to make sure that they fully understand what we're doing. It's like ethical human research, not like medical ethical, but like human research, and the arts and humanities domain at a university will understand that. And different companies or organizations will have different forms for consent. Like PIAP University has its own consent form. So if you're at the MA student and you're going to go research a language, PIAP's got this form that you need to fill out. So you get that and you can fill it out. And Saymore itself doesn't care what kind of document it is. So you can see that John Doe, this little icon says it's informed written, the consent is written. So I have a Word document that I've added that it says this is my John Doe's consent form. Now I'm going to go to Jane Doe. You can see the triangle. There's no informed consent given. So I'm just going to show you how I add consent here for Jane. And I'm just kind of making this up, but I'm going to click on add file. And here, this is a video. So I'm going to demonstrate that you can add video consent, because some languages, they're oral. So having them sign a document is not going to convey anything, but having them say they give you permission to use their language in a certain way orally adds more credibility. But you can see, we're waiting. You can see that my lovely mug there. Jane Doe still has a note as a triangle. So Saymore doesn't know that this is consent. It just knows you've added a file. So I'm going to click highlight the file and click rename. And I'm going to click informed consent. So basically it just adds underscore consent to the name of the file, and it makes a metadata file that follows the document. So that's how Saymore knows that I've given consent, or that Jane Doe has given her consent to being used for research. So that's consent. Now, for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to demonstrate something else. I'm actually going to delete this file. So, because I need an example of a person who hasn't given consent. But that's how you add consent in this thing. And I wanted to show also that the files, this is Saymore creates a folder in your documents folder called Saymore, and then your project, my project was called example project, your project is created, and all the documents you add to Saymore in one place. That's how it handles document management. Everything goes to one place. So if you have an MOU over here in one folder, finance information over there in another folder, information about the people, and I know I've got consent somewhere, but I can't find it. If you can't find it, it doesn't do you any good. So Saymore helps you by bringing it all together. What I wanted to show, I'm going to step back for a minute because I forgot to demonstrate back in project. Come on. Access protocol. So that's kind of a weird term. Access protocol deals with archiving. So the assumption, Saymore makes an assumption that you're a good linguist who wants to archive your research. So when you're done, someone else can come back and duplicate your effort, or if you're only going to go so far, you can archive it so somebody else can come after you. So Saymore understands the idea of archiving. So it's got all these different protocols. These are academic standards of protocols. I'm going to use REAP because we're SIL. REAP is SIL's archiving standard. And access protocol means who has access. So it knows that I'm using REAP, and these are the choices that I'll be able to make when it comes time. And I want to jump into session real quick to show you where you make this pick. Come on. You go to the session, and I'll come back to this later. Access. This is restricted to entity curators. This list comes from what I picked. So when I picked REAP, these options became available, and I can say, yeah, this is fine. I want this to go public. And so that when we archive it into, when SL archives it into REAP, it's signaling that we're allowing this to go out into the broader public to see. We may want to choose something different later. Partners, entity staff. These are SIL terms, and SIL people will understand what these mean. And it may be that you want to tighten it down to begin with, but then open it up later. But the point is, you're going to need to archive it at some point. And then to make an archive, you click on Project, Archive with RAMP, which is another SIL product. It makes a package, or just RAMP package is the thing that you put into REAP. And which all that really is a zip file. So it makes a folder called sessions.zip, and if you click on it, that's everything. So everything you've added into all the metadata, all the information about the people, the documents you've added come into the zip file. And then when you actually use RAMP to upload to REAP, apologize to non-SIL people, that goes with it and it's understood. All right, so we're going to minimize this and come back. I'm going to cancel this. Okay, so that is project and people. So now we're going to go to sessions, and sessions is where everything happens. So a session is just what it is. It's a session of recordings, and each session can be one recording or it can be a bunch of recordings. So you can make a session new from recording down here. And Saymore has the ability to record on its own. This is kind of your standard SL recording. You hit the button and it'll record. And then when you're done, it'll make a new session. Saymore has the option to make sessions from files on devices. Again, the idea, one potential use case, or the most common use case really, is a linguist going out into an area and with their voice recorder making a lot of recordings on a sound file on a SD card, and every time you hit the play button or record button, it makes a new file. New file, new file, new file. That's the way the sound files work. So if you click on New from Device, and you have you have the SD card or micro SD card or even the thing plugged in via USB, Saymore, you can tell Saymore where to go, and it's going to find all the WAV files that you have, and then it's going to offer to add them as new sessions, and you can see it's making a new session. And so it'll when you do it this way, each recording will be its own session. So I'm going to cancel that if it will let me. And then, or you can just click new, make new session, and then it's blank. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and then you can add files later. I'm going to delete this session. I don't need it. Yes. Okay, so this is my session. And again, you want to record everything you know about the session in this document. Give it an ID. That ID will be for your own use, whatever session, whatever numbering scheme you're using to keep track of your sessions. The date it was recorded, where it was recorded, the location, settings. Is it a restaurant? Is it at a home? Genre. What's the conversation? Linguists will understand what's going on here. All these different things. Are you recording someone singing? Drama. And again, we talked about access control earlier. Situation, what's going on? We're just sitting around the table chatting. It's informal. Okay. And then you can click on contributors. Contributors are the people that are involved in it. So I'm going to remove Jane Doe here. So then to add a person, you can just start typing. Like I've already added my people, so Jane's in here. So I start typing and it looks through my list of people. It finds Jane, and then I get to pick the role. Like, what's Jane doing? Was she a participant in the thing? Was she the person doing annotation? Was she a speaker? I'm going to make Jane a speaker. So you're just keeping track of everything. And then and you can always add all these things as you go. You don't have to get a list of everybody in your project right away. You can go back and add them. stages are, Saymore will help you keep track of where you are in terms of the transcribing of the project. You have these stages up here, and you can see that they're color-coded just visually at a glance to see where you are. So you have source recording. Do you have the recordings? Do you have informed consent? Careful speech, oral translation, transcription, written translation. If every box is filled in, then you know you're done with what you need to do for that project. And then status is just simply, it's in progress, we're working on it. If you click on status and stages, I can say it's incoming. You can see that circle at the top is changing, and this is me marking it. So I'm actually going to go through and remove. I'm going to delete this file. Should delete it all. Actually, yes, all file report it. Okay, so I deleted all the files, and you can see that all the stages are now blank. There's nothing there. So all I now have is the file. And if I want to begin to annotate this, now that all these other files are gone, you can see that this start annotating is here. So I'm going to click on start annotating. And first, because this is an MP3 file, and it assumes archiving, it wants to get every audio file to WAV file. So you just click on convert, and it turns it into a WAV file. And then you get this this segmentation method. It's how do you want to slice up the audio file so you can work on it. I'm just going to use the auto segmenter because it's easier. And we're going to click on segment, and we're going to hit the play bar button, and you're going to hear me talking about my grandmother. And then I hit the space bar to listen, and then when I see a boundary in the phrase, I hit enter. So I'm going to, this is a boundary there. My grandmother grew up in the U.S. state of West Virginia, in a region called Appalachia. She was a child in what we call the Great Depression. She was from a very poor family. So it went off screen a bit. You pull it over, so you can see I've made several segments, and this is useful for boundaries. I made 5. Now this one over here is a blank one. So sometimes you get recordings, like you have just people, when you're recording, you have people talking about what they're recording, so they'll slip into another language, just talk about this thing. You can tell it to ignore that, like we don't need that because you're not going to transcribe it. I'm going to ignore this blank space on the front and hit OK. So now it knows that I've got 5 sections or segments. The first one's ignored. And so we have transcription, then you have free translation. So I'm not a linguist, so I'm going to do transcription in IPA. And so when you see it, you can either say that's very bad, or it looks like he cheated and copied from someplace, which is because I did. So Saymore, it will allow you to play and then repeat. You'll just play it over and over again. My grandmother grew up in the U.S. state of West Virginia. My grandmother grew up in the U.S. state of West Virginia. My grandmother grew up in the U.S. state of West Virginia. I'm going to stop that because you don't need to hear that all the time. And then, come on, I would just add my IPA transcription in here, and then my free translation. Get back here, and then just. My grandmother grew up in the U.S. state of West Virginia. My grandmother grew up in the U.S. state of West Virginia. To pause. My grandmother grew up in the. Yeah. My grandma. All right, that's going to get, and then you just kind of work your way down. All right, we'll stop here. But you get the idea. You just kind of slowly work down. The Great Depression. So that's oral translation, free translation, and transcription. Actually, I need to do. But it'll know that I have, if you look at the stages, it'll know that oral translation and transcription are not done because not all the boxes are filled in. So I've actually have to come through and have to fill in all the boxes. Poor family. She was from a very poor family. Back here. And somehow I failed to keep the transcription of in a region called Appalachia. So I'm going to copy paste the wrong thing in here on purpose just to demonstrate that now the transcription and written transcription are marked as complete. But that's not everything. There's careful speech and oral translation. Careful speech is, so when you're just talking normal speech, you kind of understand what's going on, but it's not the same as if you're talking slowly and carefully to make sure it's understood. So you want to work through these things. So we're going to go through careful speech. And it's the same basic idea. As opposed to typing, it's going to be listening or recording. Might play. My grandmother grew up in the U.S. state of West Virginia. Oh, to record, press and hold the space bar. My grandmother grew up in the U.S. state of West Virginia. So then I just work to the next one. In a region called Appalachia. In a region called Appalachia. And then to listen, okay, then play again. She was a child in what we call the Great Depression. She was a child of what we call the Great Depression. She was from a very poor family. She was from a very poor family. Then you hit the OK button. Okay, so now you can see that careful speech is finished. Now we're going to go to do oral translation. And this is going to sound weird because I'm going to translate English into English. You can imagine at a minority language where you have a person speaking a language, but then the language, someone who understands that language is going to translate it into the language of wider communication. And this part of the world, you can imagine the recordings in Lawa and someone's going to verbally translate it into Thai or Northern Thai to Central Thai. That's how this is designed, but I'm just going to demonstrate it. And it works the exact same way as the careful speech. My grandmother grew up in the U.S. state of West Virginia. My grandmother grew up in the U.S. state of West Virginia. Hit the OK button. So now you can see that oral translation has been complete. But the thing that's missing is informed consent. So if I go back to sessions and click on contributors, you can see that I have Jane Doe, or John Doe and Jane Doe. But if we remember that Jane Doe doesn't have consent. That's that triangle. So until we resolve the consent from Jane Doe in the people, then we're not gonna be able to demonstrate that we have informed consent. Well, it just so happens that Jane Doe wasn't actually involved in this recording, so we're fine. So I can just remove Jane Doe from the project, and now it's complete. All of them are complete. Then I can go into stages, go back to session, stages, mark finished, and then now that box is checked. All right. The other thing I wanted to demonstrate is it doesn't have to be audio. Oftentimes you'll go out into the field and you may have a camera and you're making video recordings, which is fine because the video records so much more than just the audio. You get the setting of the village, you get anything in the background, you get pictures, you get art, anything in the background in the setting, not just audio. So you can actually get Saymore to transcribe the audio from video. So the way you do this is you click Add Files, click your video, click Open, and now you're presented with that start annotating we saw earlier for MP3. And what it's going to do is it's going to convert it. It's going to take the audio and make a WAV file out of the audio. Just click Convert, and then you're ready to start over with that recording. Another thing that it will do is, come on. So say you have the file in you've transcribed all your data, that's fine and great, but what are you going to do with it? SIL has a software tool called FLEx that will accept what's called a FLExText interlinear file. So when you can export out of Saymore into several different options. There's Audacity, which some of you will be familiar with, Elan, which is a popular tool, and then Flex interlinear text. When you export to Flex interlinear text, it brings you this box, and you need to tell it for the written language what what language you're using. So the transcription, mine obviously was English, phonetic English IPA. That's on a list of languages on my computer. I've already got a Flex project set up that'll accept phonetic IPA English, and then free translation. So you need to tell Saymore what language each thing is because it doesn't know off the top of its head. And then you click export, and it's going to make a FLExText file. Yep. And that's hit the OK button. So I've already imported this transcription into Flex by going to in Flex Text and Words, File, Import FLExText interlinear, which is the file format we exported out of Saymore, and it brought it in. And you can see when it came in the baseline. That's the IPA for the transcription. And when you click on Analyze, you can then begin to add the words from the transcription into your Flex lexicon by just working through the word as you would in Flex. So that's one way where where you can take the data that you've captured in Saymore and bring it into something else like Flex. Yeah. So as people will say, a lot of the best way to learn the language is to analyze the language is hear how it's being used, and Saymore will help you transcribe and get it in like natural discourse, so you could hear actually how it's being used. All right.
Okay, thank you for your patience. When I presented in Saymore, I used an audio file of a whopping 9 seconds long that didn't do justice to the auto segmenter. So I'm adding a few minutes on the end of it to demonstrate specifically the auto segmenter. So I've already added in a new file to a new session. You can see it's Pride and Prejudice Chapter 1. I needed an audio file that was long enough to demonstrate what the auto segmenter can do. So I've already imported it. I made it as MP3, did the import process or convert process rather, and now it's WAV. And I've come to where it says start annotating. So I'm going to use auto segmenter. You see it's already checked or selected. I'm going to click get started. And you can see that the auto segmenter has divided it into 35 segments. I'm going to hit the play button. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Ah, that's actually pretty good phrasing. But when I click on segment, you can see that it's divided it into the different segments. And then you can drag these bars like this way and that way as you need. And that's auto segmenter. So it went through and chopped up the file, and then you can come into segment if you need to and fine tune it accordingly. I can zoom in or zoom out. 100% is the smallest. So there you are, auto segmenter.